What happens when one of the most powerful women in entertainment walks onto a stage built on sharp opinions and refuses to let herself become the target? Before we dive into this unbelievable moment, make sure you subscribe to the Echo View, hit that like button, and drop a comment below, because the drama that unfolded on live television left the entire audience speechless. The lights inside the studio glowed with that familiar daytime warmth, but beneath the polished smiles and perfectly timed applause, something felt different the second Kim Kardashian stepped onto the set of The View. The energy shifted instantly. Audience members leaned forward in their seats. Producers whispered behind cameras. Even the hosts seemed more alert than usual, like they already sensed this conversation wasn't going to stay comfortable for long. Kim walked out in a sleek black outfit that somehow managed to look both effortless and untouchable. She smiled, waved to the cheering crowd, and greeted each host one by one. Joy Behar offered her usual playful grin. Sunny Hostin complimented her latest business launch. Sarah Haynes joked about trying Kim's skincare products and failing to look like her afterward. The audience laughed warmly. But when Kim reached Whoopi Goldberg, the exchange felt colder. Not rude, just careful. Whoopi's expression barely changed as she shook Kim's hand. There was a slight smile, but it didn't fully reach her eyes. Kim noticed it immediately. The cameras didn't catch the tiny pause between them, but everyone sitting at the table felt it. Kim took her seat, crossing her legs calmly while the applause faded. For the first few minutes, the conversation stayed safe. They talked about her businesses, her law studies, motherhood, balancing fame with privacy. Kim answered smoothly, professionally, with the kind of media training that came from surviving years under the harshest spotlight imaginable. But underneath her calm voice, there was tension, because she knew what people thought of her, and she knew Whoopi probably did too. "So," Joy said with a grin, "you've gone from reality TV star to business mogul to legal advocate. That's a pretty wild evolution." The audience clapped. Kim smiled politely. "I think people underestimate how much someone can grow when they're constantly being told they can't." Whoopi tilted her head slightly, and that was the moment the room subtly changed. "Well," Whoopi said slowly, folding her hands on the table, "some people would argue that being famous makes it easier to reinvent yourself. You've had access, money, attention, things most people don't." The audience reaction was immediate. Not loud, just a low murmur. Kim kept smiling, but it tightened slightly around the edges. "That's true," Kim answered carefully. "I've definitely had opportunities." Whoopi leaned back in her chair. "More than opportunities." Another pause. Sunny glanced sideways at Whoopi, sensing the shift. Even Joy's smile faded slightly. Kim inhaled slowly before speaking again. "I'm aware that my platform gives me advantages. I've never denied that. But have you ever really understood why people struggle to connect with you?" Whoopi interrupted. The audience went silent. Somebody in the crowd actually whispered, "Oh no." Kim blinked once, clearly caught off guard by how direct the question was. But instead of snapping back, she stayed composed. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Whoopi shrugged. "People look at your life and see luxury. Private jets, billion-dollar companies, photo shoots, and then they hear conversations about hard work and struggle. To some people, it sounds disconnected from reality." A few scattered claps came from the audience. Kim's jaw tightened for half a second. "Not anger. Control. You can acknowledge privilege and still work hard," Kim replied. Whoopi nodded slowly. "Sure. But sometimes it feels like celebrities want applause for surviving lives most people could never even dream of." The tension exploded across the studio. Audience members shifted uncomfortably. Cameras zoomed tighter onto Kim's face. Producers near the stage suddenly looked panicked, sensing the interview slipping away from its planned direction. Joy quickly jumped in. "I think what Whoopi's trying to say is—" "No," Whoopi interrupted calmly, never taking her eyes off Kim. "I'm saying exactly what I mean." The room froze again. Kim's expression changed then. Not dramatically, but enough. Her smile disappeared completely. For years, audiences had watched Kim stay calm under ridicule, scandals, online hate, public criticism, and relentless media obsession. She'd mastered the art of appearing unaffected. But this felt different. This wasn't social media. This wasn't gossip. This was personal. And live. Kim leaned slightly forward in her chair. "You know what's interesting?" she said quietly. The audience became completely silent. People are comfortable assuming they know my life because they've seen edited versions of it on television for years. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. Kim continued before anyone could interrupt. They see glamour. They see fame. But they don't see the pressure. They don't see what it feels like to have the entire world waiting for you to fail every single day. Whoopi opened her mouth slightly, but Kim kept going. And honestly, Kim said, her voice firmer now, there's something exhausting about constantly having to prove that you deserve respect just because your success happened differently than someone else's. A loud burst of applause erupted from part of the audience. Whoopi stayed calm, but her expression hardened. No one's saying you don't deserve respect, she replied. Kim looked directly at her. It kind of feels like you are. The crowd reacted instantly. Oh! The sound rolled through the studio like a wave. Sunny's eyes widened. Joy pressed her lips together to stop herself from reacting. Even the audience members in the front row looked stunned that Kim had actually said it out loud. Whoopi crossed her arms slightly. Well, if you feel attacked, maybe there's a reason. That line hit the room like lightning. Kim stared at her for a second, almost in disbelief. Then she gave a small laugh. Not amused. Sharp. You know, Kim said slowly. I came here expecting tough questions. That's fine. But there's a difference between asking hard questions and deciding who somebody is before they even answer. The audience applauded again, louder this time. Whoopi didn't clap. Neither did Kim. The air between them felt heavy enough to stop the entire show. And somewhere behind the cameras, producers were already realizing this interview was about to become one of the most talked about moments daytime television had seen in years. The applause faded unevenly across the studio, but the tension never left. It hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Kim Kardashian sat perfectly still at the table, her posture calm, controlled, almost too controlled. But anyone watching closely could see the shift in her expression. The polished media smile was gone now. In its place was something sharper, more guarded, more real. Across from her, Whoopi Goldberg remained unfazed on the surface, though the tightening around her eyes suggested she knew exactly how explosive the conversation had become. For a brief second, nobody spoke. Even the audience seemed afraid to interrupt whatever was unfolding between them. Then Joy Behar forced out a nervous laugh. Well, this got serious fast. A few audience members chuckled awkwardly, grateful for the release, but it didn't last. Because Kim leaned forward again. You know what bothers me, she said quietly. People love to decide what kind of woman I am before I even open my mouth. Whoopi tilted her head. That comes with fame. No, Kim replied immediately. It comes with judgment. The audience reacted again. This time louder. Whoopi's expression barely moved, but her tone sharpened slightly. Kim, people judge everybody in the public eye. But not equally, Kim shot back. That landed hard. Sunny glanced between them carefully, sensing the conversation slipping further into dangerous territory. I think there's probably a larger conversation here about celebrity culture and how women are perceived. But why is it always me? Kim interrupted suddenly. The room fell silent again. There was real emotion in her voice now. Not rehearsed emotion. Not reality show tears. Something raw. I've watched actors launch businesses and get called entrepreneurs, Kim continued. I've watched men build brands off their names and get called geniuses. But when I do it, somehow I'm still just famous for being famous. Several audience members applauded loudly. Whoopi stayed still, watching her carefully. Kim turned toward the crowd briefly before looking back at the panel. I've spent years studying law, working on prison reform, helping people behind the scenes. But somehow none of that matters because people already decided who I am 15 years ago. There was a crack in her voice near the end of the sentence. And for the first time since the interview started, the audience stopped seeing Kim Kardashian the celebrity. They saw someone tired. Whoopi finally leaned forward. But Kim, you built an empire on visibility. You can't be shocked when visibility brings criticism. Kim nodded once. I'm not shocked by criticism. Then what are you shocked by? Kim's eyes locked onto hers. The disrespect. The audience erupted. Some clapped immediately. Others gasped. A woman near the front row actually stood halfway out of her seat before sitting back down. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged anxious looks. One stage manager whispered urgently into a headset while another checked the live audience reaction monitors. This wasn't a normal celebrity interview anymore. This was becoming a confrontation. Whoopi inhaled slowly before speaking again. Respect goes both ways. Kim blinked slowly. Exactly. Another silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Joy jumped in quickly. Okay, Maybe we should pivot for a second. No, Whoopi said calmly. Joy stopped talking instantly. Whoopi kept her eyes on Kim. If we're going to have the conversation, let's have it honestly. Kim nodded. I agree. The audience could feel it building now. Every word sounded like the beginning of something bigger. Whoopi rested one arm on the table. A lot of women watching this show work multiple jobs. They struggle to pay rent, feed their families, survive. Then they hear billionaires talk about being misunderstood. Kim's face tightened slightly. And you think I don't understand struggle because I have money? Whoopi didn't answer immediately. That silence answered enough. Kim gave another small laugh, this one colder than before. That's the problem, she said. People think pain disappears when success shows up. The audience quieted again. Kim's voice softened, but somehow became even more intense. You don't think I've been humiliated publicly? Torn apart online? Had my body analyzed, my relationships mocked, my family attacked? Whoopi replied carefully. Fame has a cost. Kim nodded sharply. And somehow people think because I chose a public career, I deserve all of it. Sunny finally stepped in again, her voice gentler this time. I don't think anyone's saying you deserve cruelty. Kim looked at her briefly, appreciating the softer tone. But then she turned back to Whoopi. Do you know what it's like, Kim asked quietly, to walk into every room already hated by half the people there before you even speak? The studio became completely still. Whoopi's expression shifted slightly. Just slightly, but enough for the audience to notice. Kim continued before anyone could interrupt. People say I'm calculating. Fake. Empty. But nobody ever asks what it feels like to constantly defend your humanity to strangers. A woman in the audience wiped her eyes. Even some of the hosts looked uncomfortable now, because the conversation had stopped being entertaining. Now it felt personal. Real. Whoopi folded her hands together again. I think people respond to authenticity. Kim stared at her for a moment. Then she asked the question that changed the entire atmosphere. What exactly would make me authentic enough for you? The audience exploded. Gasps. Applause. Shocked laughter. Joy's eyes widened dramatically. Sunny leaned back in her chair, like she physically felt the impact of the question. Whoopi went silent. For the first time in the interview, she didn't have an immediate answer. And everyone noticed. Kim didn't look away. What should I do? She continued. Fail publicly? Lose everything? Stop wearing makeup? Stop being successful? What version of me would finally make people comfortable? Whoopi's jaw tightened slightly. I didn't say any of that. But it's implied, Kim said firmly. The crowd applauded again, louder than before. The cameras caught audience members nodding now. Even people who had entered the studio clearly skeptical of Kim seemed conflicted. Because whether they agreed with her or not, she was winning the room. Whoopi sensed it too. You're very good at controlling narratives, she said carefully. Kim's eyes narrowed slightly. And maybe people are very comfortable creating narratives about me. That line hit like a bomb. The audience roared. Whoopi finally leaned back in her chair again, studying Kim silently. And in that moment, something shifted completely. The power dynamic had changed. Kim was no longer sitting there defensively, trying to survive tough questions. Now she was confronting the person asking them. Live, in front of millions. And suddenly, even the hosts around the table looked unsure of what would happen next. The studio no longer felt like a daytime talk show. It felt like a battlefield wrapped in bright lights and television smiles. Every person at the table could feel it. The audience could feel it. Even viewers at home were probably frozen in front of their screens, waiting to see who would crack first. Kim Kardashian sat motionless after her last statement, her eyes locked on Whoopi Goldberg with a calm intensity that somehow felt more powerful than yelling ever could. And Whoopi knew it. For years, she had controlled conversations at that table with experience, wit, and authority. Few guests ever pushed back directly. Fewer survived when they did. But Kim wasn't backing down. Not this time. The silence stretched so long that someone in the audience nervously coughed. Then Whoopi finally spoke. You know what I think? She asked slowly. Kim didn't blink. What? I think you've spent so much time learning how to survive public opinion that you don't know how to hear criticism without turning it into an attack. The audience reacted instantly. Some clapped. Others groaned softly. Kim tilted her head slightly, almost surprised by the statement. But when she answered, her voice stayed calm. And I think maybe some people confuse criticism with permission to disrespect women they've already decided not to value. The crowd erupted again. Joy muttered under her breath, Jesus. Sunny pressed her lips together, visibly trying not to react. Whoopi's expression hardened slightly now. Nobody's disrespecting you. Kim gave a small nod. That's interesting, because it feels like every accomplishment I mention immediately comes with a reason why it doesn't count. Whoopi leaned forward. Kim, people are allowed to question celebrity culture. And I'm allowed to defend myself. The audience burst into applause again. One producer near the stage rubbed his forehead anxiously while another whispered, "This is going viral before the show even ends." Kim could feel the room shifting around her now. The audience energy had changed completely. What started as skepticism toward her was slowly turning into support. And that seemed to frustrate Whoopi more than she expected. You want honesty? Whoopi asked. Kim nodded once. Always. Whoopi folded her hands together. Sometimes it feels like your brand profits off insecurity. The room gasped. Even Joy looked stunned that she had gone there. Kim blinked slowly. Then again. For the first time all interview, she looked genuinely hurt. Not angry. Hurt. What does that mean? She asked quietly. Whoopi didn't back away. Beauty standards. Perfection culture. Social media pressure. Young girls comparing themselves to impossible lifestyles. Kim inhaled deeply. You think I created that? I think you helped normalize it. The audience exploded into overlapping reactions. Some clapped loudly. Others booed. The tension became chaos for a moment as voices echoed across the studio. Kim sat there silently while the noise swirled around her. Then slowly, she leaned toward the table. You know what's dangerous? She asked softly. The audience quieted almost immediately. Acting like women can only be one thing. Whoopi narrowed her eyes slightly. Kim continued. If a woman embraces beauty, she's shallow. If she embraces ambition, she's calculated. If she becomes successful, suddenly she's responsible for everybody else's insecurities. Applause thundered across the room. Kim's voice grew stronger with every word now. I never told women they had to look like me. I never told people to hate themselves. But somehow society creates impossible standards and then blames the women standing inside them. Even Sunny nodded slightly at that point. Whoopi noticed. You still benefit from the machine, she replied firmly. Kim didn't deny it. Yes, she admitted immediately. I do. That answer surprised everyone. Kim looked directly into the cameras now. But benefiting from a system and inventing it are two different things. The audience clapped loudly again. Whoopi crossed her arms slightly. That sounds very polished. Kim smiled faintly. And that sounds dismissive. Another explosion from the crowd. Joy looked completely overwhelmed now, glancing back and forth between them like she was watching a tennis match nobody could stop. The producers were panicking backstage. One of them reportedly motioned for commercial break twice already, but the hosts ignored it. They knew they were in the middle of television history. Whoopi's voice lowered. You always know exactly what to say. Kim answered immediately. Because I've spent 20 years being forced to defend my existence. That line hit the room harder than anything else she had said. The audience fell quiet again. Even Whoopi paused. Kim's expression softened slightly, but her eyes stayed intense. You know what people never ask, she continued. What it costs to become a person the world constantly consumes. Nobody interrupted her now. I've lived through public humiliation in ways most people would never survive emotionally. Every mistake amplified. Every heartbreak turned into entertainment. Every flaw discussed like I'm not human. A few audience members nodded quietly. Kim looked down for a brief second before continuing. And after all that, people still act angry that I learned how to protect myself. Whoopi studied her carefully. For the first time since the interview began, there was less confrontation in her face and more curiosity. But Kim noticed something else too. Doubt. The audience was no longer fully on Whoopi's side. And everyone at the table could feel it. Sunny finally spoke carefully. I think what people are reacting to is seeing a more vulnerable side of you than they expected. Kim gave a small laugh. That's because people only believe vulnerability when it looks messy. The crowd applauded loudly again. Whoopi sighed quietly. You make everything sound philosophical. Kim looked directly at her. No, I make it sound human. The room exploded. A woman near the back shouted, Tell her Kim. Joy covered her mouth, trying not to laugh at the audience reaction, while producers desperately signaled for calm. But the moment had already escaped control. Whoopi leaned back slowly, staring at Kim in silence for several seconds. Then she asked one final question. and the entire mood inside the studio changed again. Do you think, Whoopi asked carefully, that you've ever truly been held accountable for anything? The audience gasped instantly. Kim's face froze. Not in shock, in disbelief, because now the conversation had crossed into territory far deeper than celebrity criticism. And judging by the dangerous calm suddenly settling over Kim Kardashian's expression, everyone knew her next answer was about to change everything. The question sat in the air like a spark waiting to ignite gasoline. Do you think you've ever truly been held accountable for anything? For a moment, Kim Kardashian didn't move. The audience held its breath. The host stayed silent. Even the cameras seemed frozen on her face as millions of viewers watched her absorb the weight behind Whoopi Goldberg's words. Then Kim slowly leaned back in her chair and smiled. But it wasn't the polished smile people were used to seeing on magazine covers or red carpets. This one looked tired, almost sad. You really want the truth? Kim asked quietly. Whoopi nodded once. Kim looked around the table before speaking again. I think people confuse public punishment with accountability. The room stayed silent. Kim's voice was steady now, calm in a way that somehow made every word hit harder. I've been publicly humiliated for 20 years. I've been mocked, reduced, dehumanized, analyzed, and hated by millions of strangers who know almost nothing about me. Whoopi started to respond, but Kim kept going. And somehow, she said, that still isn't enough for some people. The audience murmured softly. Kim's eyes locked onto Whoopi again. You ask if I've been held accountable. Accountable for what exactly? Existing too loudly? Being too visible? Becoming successful in a way people didn't respect? Whoopi's expression tightened slightly. For the influence you have, she answered carefully. Kim nodded slowly. And I've spent years trying to use that influence to help people. But no matter what I do, some people only want to drag me back to a version of myself they decided to hate a long time ago. Applause burst across the audience again, this time even louder. The energy inside the studio had completely changed now. Earlier, people were watching a celebrity being challenged. Now it felt like they were witnessing someone finally say everything they had buried for years. Whoopi remained composed, but her silence was becoming noticeable. Kim leaned forward slightly. You know what accountability actually looks like? She asked softly. Nobody answered. It looks like growth. The audience clapped immediately. It looks like learning publicly while the world laughs at your mistakes. It looks like trying to become better while people keep insisting you never will. Sunny nodded subtly again. Joy looked emotional now, clearly affected by the intensity of the moment unfolding beside her. Kim's voice cracked slightly for the first time all interview. I was never allowed to evolve in peace. That line changed everything. The audience went completely silent, because suddenly this wasn't about celebrity culture anymore. It wasn't about fame or business or social media. It was about being trapped inside a public identity the world refused to let go of. Kim blinked rapidly once before continuing. Every time I tried to grow, somebody reminded me who they thought I used to be. Every time I accomplished something, somebody said it didn't count. She looked directly at Whoopi. And honestly, hearing that kind of judgment from another woman hurts more than people realize. A stunned silence swept across the studio. Whoopi's face changed slightly at that. Not anger. Reflection. For the first time since the interview began, she looked genuinely affected. Kim continued quietly. I came here today expecting conversation, maybe disagreement, but I didn't expect to feel dismissed before I even had a chance to explain myself. The audience erupted into applause again, louder than at any other point in the show. Several people stood up. Then more followed. Within seconds, part of the studio audience was giving Kim a standing ovation. Joy's eyes widened. Sunny clapped softly. Even some crew members behind the cameras looked shocked by how dramatically the room had turned. Whoopi stayed seated, but she didn't interrupt. For the first time all interview, she simply listened. Kim exhaled slowly, emotion visible in her eyes now. I'm not asking everyone to like me, she said. I'm asking people to stop pretending they know my heart because they've seen headlines. The applause became thunderous. Whoopi looked down briefly at the table before finally speaking again. You make some fair points. The audience reacted instantly, because nobody expected that. Kim looked surprised too. Whoopi sighed softly. I still believe public figures deserve scrutiny. They do, Kim agreed immediately. But, Whoopi paused carefully. Maybe sometimes we forget there's still a human being sitting in front of us. The audience applauded again. And just like that, the entire atmosphere shifted. The tension didn't disappear completely, but something else entered the room now. Understanding. Not perfect agreement. Not friendship. Just understanding. Kim nodded slowly. That's all I wanted. For a second, the two women simply looked at each other across the table, the heat of the confrontation finally cooling into something quieter and far more emotional. Then Joy broke the tension dramatically. Well, she said with a nervous laugh, Twitter is going to explode in about 5 minutes. The audience burst into laughter. Even Kim smiled genuinely this time. Whoopi shook her head with a faint grin. Probably already exploding. And she was right, because while the show continued into commercial break, clips from the confrontation were already spreading across social media at lightning speed. Kim Kardashian shuts down Whoopi Goldberg live. Most intense view interview in years. Kim finally says what celebrities are really feeling. Within hours, reaction videos flooded YouTube. Entertainment sites pushed breaking headlines. Fans and critics battled across comment sections. Some praised Whoopi for asking difficult questions. Others defended Kim fiercely, calling it the rawest and most honest they had ever seen her. Even celebrities started weighing in. Some subtly supported Kim with cryptic posts about women being allowed to evolve. Others praised the conversation itself for exposing how brutal public judgment had become. And by the end of the night, one thing was undeniable. Nobody could stop talking about what happened on that stage. Because beneath the viral clips and dramatic headlines, viewers had witnessed something rare in celebrity television. Two powerful women colliding in real time, until the performance disappeared and the truth finally showed through. Now we want to hear from you. Was Kim Kardashian right to defend herself the way she did? Or did Whoopi Goldberg ask the tough questions people were already thinking? Drop your opinion in the comments below, because this debate is far from over. And if you want more explosive celebrity drama, emotional confrontations, and unforgettable stories from the world of television and fame, make sure you subscribe to the Echo View, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next shocking moment.